What if I told you that Christopher Columbus's crew claimed to have seen mermaids, but instead of the beautiful creatures of legend, they described them as having masculine traits and looking far less attractive than expected? Strange, right? Well, Columbus wasn't alone in these sightings. Throughout history, explorers and sailors have recorded encounters with mysterious sea creatures that they believed to be mermaids. But were they really seeing mythical beings? In today's video, I look at a couple of real historical accounts of mermaid sightings, their links to medieval folklore, maps, and even Queen Elizabeth I. So, let's separate fact from fiction and uncover the truth behind the mermaid myths. On this day in Tudor history, the 9th of January 1493, explorer Christopher Columbus recorded in his ship's journal, "On the previous day, when the admiral went to the Rio del Oro, he said he quite distinctly saw 3 mermaids, which rose well out of the sea, but they're not so beautiful as they're said to be, for their faces had some masculine traits." Mermaids, as you probably know, are mythical creatures whose origin is the siren of ancient Greek mythology. The original siren was actually a bird with a human head, but the Greeks were depicting the siren as part fish by the classical period. Homer told of the sirens using their beautiful song as a lure, and that has also become associated with the mermaid. By 1493, when Columbus's crew allegedly saw 3 mermaids, the mermaid had the head and torso of a woman and instead of legs, a fishtail. They're depicted in this way in medieval manuscripts, and the British Library explains, mermaids and sirens also frequently appear in the margins of psalters as a symbol of temptation. In the Luttrell Psalter, a siren holds a mirror and a comb, perhaps as a warning against the lure of vanity and luxury. Sadly, it's thought that the 3 creatures Columbus's crew saw were actually manatees. No wonder he thought they weren't as pretty as expected. In 1608, in the reign of King James I, explorer and navigator Henry Hudson recorded his crew seeing a mermaid off the coast of Greenland, writing, "From the navel upward, her back and breasts were like a woman's, as they say they saw her, but her body as big as one of us. Her skin very white, and long hair hanging down behind, of colour black. In her going down they saw her tail, which was like the tail of a porpoise, and speckled like a mackerel." The National Geographic website explains that sirenians, aquatic mammals like the 3 species of manatee and the dugong, whose name actually comes from the Malay for the Lady of the Sea, have long fueled mermaid myths and legend across the cultures, as they're known to rise out of the sea like the alluring sirens of Greek myth, occasionally performing tail stands in shallow water. Their forelimbs also have 5 sets of finger-like bones, and their neck vertebrae allow them to turn their heads. It's not surprising that sailors unfamiliar with these sea mammals, also known as sea cows, could mistake them for the mermaids of popular myths and legends from a distance. And I expect Hudson's crew were exaggerating, or perhaps the hair that they saw on the mermaid was actually something like seaweed. Of course, they might have been drunk too. And they weren't just sightings. Dead mermaids, in inverted commas, were brought back from voyages to the New World and put on display. And yes, they were manatees or dugongs, not real mermaids. But if you look at this dugong skeleton, you can kind of understand how it fooled sailors of the early modern era. I love the Carta Marina, a map created by the Swedish cartographer, writer and Catholic clergyman Olaus Magnus, and published in 1539. It was the first map of the Nordic countries to give details and place names. I love it because it has some wonderful sea creatures on it. Magnus described some of these sea creatures in his 1555 book. Now, it's got a Latin title and my Latin is pretty non-existent. I'm going to try and pronounce it. It's called the Historia de Gentibus Septentrionalibus. Whew. It was published in English as a description of the northern peoples, an exemplar of which was given to William Cecil, Lord Burleigh, when the Swedish king was wooing Queen Elizabeth I. Magnus described a prister as having a face like a warthog, 2 blowholes on top of its head, and a body that was 200 feet long. It had a broad forked tail and finned feet. Then there was the sea orm, a huge sea serpent, like this one attacking a ship just off the coast of Norway. And just look at this gigantic lobster just off the coast of Scotland. I'll give you a link to Magnus's map, which you can zoom in on to see all the wonderful sea creatures. If you've ever seen a skeleton of a blue whale, you can understand why sailors and fishermen in times gone by believed in mythical creatures. There were ginormous sea creatures. And mythical creatures weren't just depicted on maps and in books. There's one in the Armada portrait from Elizabeth I's reign. The painting is full of symbolism, and it's thought that as mermaids were said to tempt sailors to their fate, that the mermaid in the Armada portrait symbolises the Queen's might over the crews of the Spanish Armada. Mermaids were also said to be ill omens, foretelling and provoking disaster. And the Spanish Armada's planned invasion of England was a disaster, with them being attacked by fire ships and being scattered by bad weather conditions. Perhaps it wasn't the Protestant wind of Elizabethan propaganda that caused the scattering of the ships. It was mermaids. Mermaid sightings may seem like tall tales, but they reveal a fascinating side of early exploration, folklore and symbolism. From Columbus's journals to Henry Hudson's crew, it's easy to see how imagination and the unknown blurred the lines between myth and reality. These stories also remind us of the power of storytelling, how legends like mermaids found their way into maps, portraits, and even royal propaganda like the Armada portrait of Queen Elizabeth I. Whether they were seen as ill omens or temptresses, mermaids have captivated human imagination for centuries. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this dive into Tudor history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join me again for more fascinating tales from the past. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.